Hi, in today's video I'm going to talk about some of the hidden or less known costs associated with buying a new build property, and I'm going to really talk about those things that are in addition to buying your normal home. So normally you'd have legal fees, estate agency fees, etc., but these are things that are probably specific to new builds and some things to look out for and to make sure you're asking the right questions so that you're fully informed when you're proceeding with the purchase. And it's also useful to just have the knowledge about these things so that when you're speaking with a sales office or negotiating a purchase, you know to ask the questions and what to look out for. So the first thing is that you will likely to be charged an estate management fee or a service fee, and this is usually done on a monthly or yearly basis. It applies to nearly all new build sites, and basically it's the costs of upkeep, so mowing the communal lawns, taking care of the roads because they're unlikely to be publicly adopted. That might come later down the line, and that's something else that you'll need to check. But if there's play areas, things like that, it's for the maintenance and upkeep of those. Whose responsibility for that will depend estate to estate, and it may be that ownership will be transferred to a sort of residents association later down the line. But in terms of the amount of control that residents may have, that's going to vary. But it's things to ask questions about, but in the knowledge that there's probably not much that you can do about it. I've lived on 2 different new build estates, and the service charged has ranged between £25 to £30, and we have been able to do that on a monthly basis via direct debit, but I've heard some stories of people having to pay it up front and not getting very much time to pay. It's something to ask questions about, but also when you're looking to put a budget together in terms of what you can afford and your monthly outgoings, it's something to factor in, and is not necessarily well publicised within the sales office for the developer. No surprises there. The next thing that I recommend doing is asking questions and being completely fully informed about what is and is not included within the property. I found when I was viewing properties from different developments, different developers, this varied hugely. So, when you're looking around a show home, remember to keep in mind that it's usually the top spec of everything and usually most of the additional features that you can have. So it's very unlikely that your home, if you're just having the basics, will look anything like that. So on the one hand, you've got sort of the white goods, your flooring, the paintwork, the sort of the worktops, the type of kitchen, the cupboards, things like that will usually all be extras. You'll find that the developers are inflated prices. So if you are paying the developer to put in things like your washing machine and your fridge, it's probably going to be more expensive than if you were going to go to sort of a normal retail outfit. So you may want to sort of either negotiate on that or think about buying it separately. The same goes for the carpets and flooring. I think a lot of it depends on whether you just want to move into your house and it's sort of fully finished in terms of, flooring and things like that. But you may also want to shop around. Important to bear in mind that these are the sort of things that you can really negotiate on with new build developments and house builders. I will come further to that in a moment, but make sure that you know what's included. We actually found as well with some developers things like the turf, fences around your garden, taps, showers, light fittings, plugs were extras, and that you would have to pay for them and choose the specification. Now this it seems crazy to me because you need light fittings and taps for the house to work, but some of them deem it to be extra. But the thing to think about is if it's not part of the purchase price, you might not be able to get a mortgage for those costs. And if you're having to put all of those things in, your flooring, your taps, your light fittings, fencing, that's a huge amount of money that you're going to have to find the funds to pay for, as well as your deposit, your legal fees and everything like that. I know putting on the mortgage, you're having the interest over the longer term, but for first time buyers in particular, you might not be in a position to afford the extras like taps. So just be really clear, don't be blinded by what's in the show home, and ask all of the questions about what's included. They should have a list and a booklet of everything, and just really take the time to look over that and know exactly what you're going to be buying for that money. Now, as I've said, I think flooring tends to be quite a good negotiation tactic to sort of get that thrown in with the purchase price, but in my experience, things like blinds, shutters or curtains or whatever that you're having aren't usually that easy to negotiate and will be something that you'll probably have to pay for after you've moved in. And a good tip is to book that in early, because otherwise you end up putting cardboard or sheets or something over the first, when you first moved in. But the cost of that can be pretty substantial, and I'm talking sort of thousands when you've got quite a few windows across the whole of the house. So again, factor that into your budget, and in terms of what you're going to have to fund pretty early on after you've just moved in. Another thing to note is if you're in a fortunate position to be able to have a garage or a separate building, there may be other complicating factors to make that more expensive. In terms of a practical level, the floor is usually unsealed, which means all the sort of concrete dust will go absolutely everywhere and get things filthy. So you'll have to either pay someone or do it yourself, get it sort of a sealant and paint the floor to seal that. It's not very much money, but it's something that you'd not necessarily factored in. So I don't know, like £70 I think the sealant is, and all the hassle of actually having to do it, so make sure you're aware of that. But also you might have to pay the additional fees to get power and light if you're going to put a freezer or whatever into the garage, so think about that. Now most builders will give you sort of a 2-year, not guarantee, but in the first 2 years they'll come out and fix any snags, so you have to really concentrate and look at that in the first week or so. And you can go around and look if there's scratches on things or holes in things, or if things are uneven they've missed. These houses are built by humans, there will be mistakes, things will go wrong, pipes not fixed correctly, you might have a leak. It's sort of almost expected. Hopefully, touch wood, nothing too severe, but you are going to expect for some things to go wrong, and that's usually covered in the first 2 years. But again, look at your own contract documents. Although you might not necessarily have to pay for the work, it is time consuming, it's a hassle. You have to set aside time away from work to let the workmen in to fix certain things, and sometimes it's a bit of a battle with the developers to get things sorted out. So yeah, not necessarily a hidden cost, but it is a time cost that you should be aware of. You may also find that there's certain additional hoops to jump through in terms of the legal process for buying a new build, particularly if you're using the Help to Buy scheme. So you'll probably have different charges for getting that documentation and for your own solicitor to liaise with the Help to Buy people, and also the developers' solicitors. There'll be a £100 charge for contract release documents, things like that. So it can just add up a little bit extra in terms of buying a new build. So again, something to flag, particularly if there's delays and things like that with the build, that can sort of add on extra hassle and stress. The other thing to check is whether the property is a leasehold or freehold, and that basically means who owns the actual land that the property is sitting on. If you've got a leasehold property, you'll own the property but not necessarily the land, that will still belong to the freeholder. Now, you might have 999 year leases, but you would still have to potentially buy the freehold later down the line. There's a big scandal out at the moment in terms of the leasehold scandal, particularly for new build properties, and the government has announced intentions to ban the sale of leasehold new properties. That's not yet law as far as I'm aware, but they've certainly reduced in number, particularly sort of in the last 5 years or so. But ask the question, check whether that's going to be an issue for you, because you might have to pay for ground rent or additional service charges, and can be a real nightmare when you come to sell. So ask those questions. It's worth noting that things like flats, or if you've got a garage where there's a flat above it, or an apartment above it, that will necessarily have to be leasehold due to the way that they are split up, because not everyone can own the whole of it. So, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it may add additional costs in terms of exploring the leasehold and additional fees for registering and things with your solicitor. So again, another thing to factor in, particularly say if you've got a choice between different plots on the estate. So have a think about that as well. And yeah, just be really mindful of who your developer is. The Competition and Markets Authority announced, I think last year, that they were investigating potentially mis-selling from some of the big developers in terms of the leasehold scandal. That was Barratt, Countryside and Persimmon, I believe. So yeah, just do your research, know what you're getting into, and ask all of those right questions, and make sure your solicitor's investigating it fully. Finally, I touched on it earlier, but there is scope for negotiation with developers. A lot of that will depend on supply and demand. You'll find if you're getting towards the end of a development or the end of the developer's financial year, there may be more scope for negotiation, or if a sale has just fallen through, for example. I found in my experience you may struggle to negotiate the sale price, although there is scope for that, but what you may do is get sort of incentives, so things like the flooring, white goods, maybe all or a contribution to stamp duty costs or your legal fees, or a combination of those together. So, you know, practice your negotiation skills, don't be too emotive or show the developer that you've fallen in love with a property. You know, really negotiate as much as you can to try and get the best value that you can. Just be mindful there is a limit on how much the developers can give you. I think it's about 5% of the purchase price, but that may vary. Particularly lenders or mortgage providers might specify something because it's almost inflating the value of the house. They can alter the loan to value ratio, so it's something to bear in mind, and you may need to sort of think about those incentives. So there is sort of a ceiling in terms of your negotiating power, but you know, still work as hard as you can to get the best deal that you can for you. So I hope that you found those helpful. You know, buying your first property is a big deal, and you know, I think the Help to Buy schemes really helped a lot of people get on the property ladder, and particularly buying some new builds. But you know, those factors aren't necessarily well published by the sales office, so ask your questions, do your research, and best of luck with it. I hope you found this helpful. If you do, please subscribe. I'm going to intend to do some more sort of new build and Help to Buy videos in the very near future. Thank you.